This is Bot City, and I'm Jet West. Today on the show, OpenAI's CFO said no IPO next year. Then the company turned around and filed for one anyway. So what changed in 7 days? OpenAI's CFO said the company was not ready to go public in 2026. That was 7 days ago. As of today, multiple outlets are reporting OpenAI is preparing to file confidentially for an IPO in the coming days or weeks. 7 days. That is the gap between the company's own financial gatekeeper saying, hold on, and the CEO apparently saying, go. I want to sit with that supplier financing headline for a second, because I think it is the most interesting number in this whole story, and we will get there. First, the structure of what we actually know and what we do not, because I am going to be honest with you about the sourcing here. Every article body in today's research set came back as 403 forbidden. What we have are headlines, publication dates, and the timeline those dates produce. The headlines are real. The contradiction they create is real. The specifics underneath them, the revenue figures, the valuation targets, the actual quotes from the CFO, the governance terms, none of that is accessible today. So this episode is going to be precise about what the evidence shows and careful about what it implies. What the evidence shows is a timeline that does not behave like a well-managed IPO process. Back in early April, more than 6 weeks before today, the information was already reporting that OpenAI's CEO and CFO were diverging on IPO timing. Not a minor scheduling preference, a divergence. That word in financial reporting means two people in the same building are telling different stories to different rooms. That headline ran in early April. It sat there. Then, on May 13th, the information published two more headlines on the same day. One, OpenAI CFO questions 2026 IPO readiness. Two, OpenAI's IPO hopes face skeptical investor community. Both on the same day. Both, by the way, from the same outlet that had already flagged the internal disagreement 6 weeks earlier. That is not a reporter stumbling onto a scoop. That is a reporter who has been cultivating a source inside OpenAI's finance team for at least 6 weeks. Then, 7 days later, Axios and other outlets report the company is filing confidentially in the coming days or weeks. So what happened in those 7 days? Did the CFO's concerns evaporate? Did new information arrive that changed the calculus? Did someone in that building simply get overruled? We do not know. The article bodies are not accessible, but the options are limited, and only one of them is flattering to the process. Option 1. Something materially changed in 7 days. New investor commitments, a favorable SEC signal, a shift in the broader market. The May 19th headline, Investors Falling Back in Love with IPOs, offers a possible tailwind. General IPO sentiment improving could move the needle on internal confidence. That is a real possibility. Option 2. The CFO's concerns did not change, but the CEO's timeline won. The divergence that was visible in April resolved the way executive divergences usually resolve, which is that the person with more institutional power set the calendar, and the person with more financial caution found a way to get comfortable in public while remaining uncomfortable in private. Option 3 is the one that the supplier financing headline points toward. And this is where I want you to pay attention. One headline from May 12th, the day before the CFO's public skepticism landed, states that OpenAI is making billions by promising to buy from suppliers. No dollar amount is confirmed in the headlines. The word billions is in the headline, not verified by body text I can access. But the mechanism described is familiar. Before a company goes public, it sometimes enters into advanced purchase commitments with suppliers, essentially promising future spend in exchange for upfront capital or favorable terms. If you are a compute-hungry AI company and you promise a cloud provider or a chip manufacturer several $billion in future purchases, they may front you cash or credit that improves your near-term financial picture. That improved picture shows up in your pre-IPO financials. It shows up on the page that investors see before they decide what the company is worth. That is not fraud. It is also not nothing. It is a way of making a balance sheet look more robust than the underlying business operations alone would suggest. And the timing, May 12th for the supplier financing headline, May 13th for the CFO's public skepticism, May 20th for the imminent filing reports, that sequence does not feel like coincidence. It feels like a negotiation about which version of the financials gets to be the story. What is conspicuously absent from every headline in this set is the name of the CFO. No name. The CEO's role is implied throughout. And given that we are talking about the person who has been running OpenAI and has been the public face of the company's ambitions for years, the absence of a name there is less strange. But the CFO, the person whose reservations are apparently the entire story, is referred to institutionally throughout. That is either a sourcing limitation or it is a deliberate choice by a reporter protecting access. Either way, it is a gap. Also absent, Microsoft, the company that invested roughly $10 billion in OpenAI, that built its cloud infrastructure around the partnership, that embeds OpenAI's models across its enterprise product line. Not one headline in this set mentions Microsoft's stake in the IPO, its role in the governance structure going forward, or how the public filing affects a partnership that is partially responsible for OpenAI's ability to operate at the scale it operates at. For a company preparing one of the most significant public market debuts in AI history, that silence around its largest investor is worth noting. And then there is the governance question, which is not in any of these headlines and should be. OpenAI was structured as a nonprofit with a capped profit subsidiary. That structure was always going to create complications if the company ever went to public markets. A public company has fiduciary obligations to shareholders. A nonprofit board has obligations to its stated mission. What happens when those two sets of obligations conflict at the board level? The headlines do not address it. The IPO filing, when it becomes public, will have to. That document is going to be very interesting reading. I will put it this way. The S1 for this company is going to be one of the more creative pieces of financial literature produced in the last decade. The broader market timing is real and it matters. Investor sentiment on IPOs has been cold for several years, and a thaw in May of this year creates a window. Companies do not always choose the ideal moment to go public. They choose the available moment. If the window is open now and the internal disagreement has been resolved or papered over, the rational move is to file while sentiment holds. The confidential filing buys time. It lets the company go through SEC review without the financials becoming public immediately. The public does not see the revenue figures, the loss figures, the governance details, or the risk factors until at least 15 days before the roadshow begins, by which point the company controls the narrative around those numbers more effectively than it would if the filing dropped cold. And that control of narrative is exactly what makes the CFO's public skepticism 1 week before filing reports so difficult to read cleanly. Either the CFO was genuinely flagging a concern that got resolved, or the CFO was providing a signal to someone, investors, board members, a specific counterparty in a negotiation, that the timeline was moving faster than the financial case fully supported. Those are two very different things, and the headlines, without the body text, cannot tell us which. What I can tell you is this: the gap between a CFO saying not yet and the company filing anyway is not a red flag by itself. Executives disagree about timing constantly, and the CEO's job is to make the call. The gap becomes meaningful when you look at what was happening in the week between those two events. A supplier financing mechanism that produces billions in promised future spend. An investor sentiment piece landing the day before the filing reports. A CFO whose reservations disappeared from the headlines at precisely the moment the process accelerated. That is not a contradiction. That is a sequence. And the sequence tells you that someone decided the window was more important than the readiness and moved the calendar to match the decision they had already made. I'm Jet West in Bot City. Keep bussing.
Grab news. Thomas.